housekeeping items. So as you probably have all noticed, you're just set to be mute and have your video off. As we go through the presentation, if you have any questions, you can enter your question into the chat, and when we get to the end, we can go over them all as the moderator, read them out to Cheryl, and she'll be able to answer them then. And after this presentation's over, I will be sending out a link to the recording for anyone who may have not been able to make it. I know I had a few emails of people who, just due to life, weren't able to make it tonight, and this will all be recorded and available for reference after. And with that, Cheryl has kindly prepared some very valuable information in a nice informative sheet. So that'll be a good resource as well to take from this. But I guess without further ado, I'd like to welcome everyone to our first inaugural Resilient Homes, Parks, and People speaker series. So this is part of a 5-week speaker series on the topic of flooding, climate change, and stormwater management. I'm very excited to have Cheryl here with us tonight. Cheryl Evans is the director of the Home Flood Protection at the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation, and that's at the University of Waterloo. She has over 20 years of community engagement and program management experience in the fields of stormwater management, flood risk mitigation, and home energy conservation, as well as youth environmental education. She served as a technical committee member on the CSA's guideline on basement flood protection and risk reduction, and was a lead developer for the Ontario College Flood Risk Assessment Training Program, which me and a few of my colleagues recently did that 4-week course, and it was very informative. And she currently serves as a member of the City of Toronto's Flood Resilience Working Group and is a climate change committee member for the Canadian Water and Wastewater Association. Cheryl's team is the recipient of the Canada's Clean 50 Top Project Awards for 2020, and she also holds a BSc in Environment and Resource Studies from the University of Waterloo. So that's a very short summary of a lot of very valuable experience, and as I mentioned, we're very glad to have you here today to discuss this and be our first speaker. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and you can start your presentation.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alistair, and it's great to be here. So I'm going to try to share my screen. There we go. It looks very promising. Can you see my screen, Alistair?
Not yet, no.
Okay. I'll try again.
There we go.
There we go.
Hey! The toughest part of all of this is over.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks for having me here. Like I was mentioning to Alistair, I was in Charlottetown about 3 years ago, and a lot of this, the work that we're doing today and that I've enjoyed doing over the last few years regarding community engagement and presentations and connecting, sort of theory with what people can really do on the ground. A lot of it can be tied back to some really great meetings and really great people that I connected with in Charlottetown. So I just wanted to give that nod to the folks in Charlottetown. So the presentation tonight, the focus is, whoops, I'm going to go backwards for a second. It's called Protecting Homes from Flood Damage on Prince Edward Island. So we'll just dive right in. The agenda for tonight, we'll talk about what the Intact Center is, where I work. We'll talk about flooding in Canada, the growing cost of flooding, the growing impacts of climate change. And then we're going to dive right into protecting homes from flood damage. So talking about, first of all, what are the different types of flood damage? We're going to talk about how to address some of the common home flood risks. And we'll also talk about sort of the limits to those, those protections and some of the other things you can consider doing when you're in a higher risk property. We'll give a little bit of information about flood insurance because a lot of people in the country don't really understand some of the basic nuances of insurance. And then I'll share a wide variety of free resources that are available through the Intact Centre, but also through the province of Prince Edward Island. So first of all, the Intact Centre is an applied research centre with a national focus. We are based at the University of Waterloo. We were launched in 2015 with a gift from Intact Financial Corporation, and we provide bilingual services. So we have speakers and presentations and content that is available in English and in French. We have two main goals at the Intact Centre. One is to change the national conversation about climate change to address climate adaptation. A lot of the climate change discussions historically have focused on limiting greenhouse gas emissions, and that's excellent. We need to continue to work on that. But the other side of the coin is climate adaptation. Climate change is happening. It will continue to happen. We need to adapt now to help us become as resilient as possible when challenges occur. Number two is to help residents, communities, and businesses to reduce the risks associated with climate change and extreme weather events. And something I do like to mention is that the little sort of caveat, the little starred box on the right there, it says the Intact Centre operates independently of all funders and does not benefit from the sale of any product or services. So we have funding sources from insurance sources, from government sources, from not-for-profit sources, but we operate independently, and that's just important for people to know because I'm not here to sell you anything except for self-help ideas. So to take a step sort of back and to look at the bigger picture of climate change and how it's impacting sort of some of the financial, some financial impacts in Canada, we can look at the catastrophic insurable losses data, which is basically a table that is assembled by the Insurance Bureau of Canada. They track any cat loss, which is considered a $25 million loss for one event, a cat loss. They track them over time, and they sort of look at the trends. And what they found when they looked at the data from 1983 till about 2009 was that catastrophic loss events in Canada would come out for about an average of $400 million per year for the whole country. And then what started to happen was this increase that continued and has stayed higher since 2009. So since 2009, there has only been 1 year where the combined cat claims for the country have not been $1 billion. That was 2015. Only one, and the average of those claims from 2009 on have jumped from, remember, $400 million. Now we're sitting at an average of $1.8 billion. So there's this upward trend that's also predicted to continue to increase as climate change increases its impacts. So over 50% of those cat losses are due to water damage. And the uninsured losses, so these are cat insured claims, the uninsured losses of government and householders are estimated to be 3 to 4 times those costs. Part of the reason for that is insurance is a business. They only cover specific things within your policy, and they have limits to how much they will cover. So if you are not covered for specific damage or max out of what you can get back from insurance, then you have to pay it by yourself, and that is then paid by primarily homeowners, and as well some supports from government as well. So unfortunately, as a result, in order to balance the budget, insurers have had to respond by increasing premiums for home insurance up to 25% over the past 5 years. They've also been more choosy about where they are insuring depending on risk, and they've increased the number of people who can only get a very low cap limit, so just a very small amount of insurance coverage. So some additional information to note is that the average cost tracked by the Insurance Bureau of Canada to repair damage caused by basement flooding is a whopping $43,000 in Canada. So say your cap limit is only $10,000, then you're on the hook for say $33,000 each time a flood occurs. And the average family loses 7 days of work time recovering from a flood. So not only are you having to pay out cash, but you're also having to lose income from work. And the real pinch point here is that people aren't flush with endless piles of cash, and with repeated losses, this increases the likelihood of mortgage defaults and pockets of insurable housing in Canada. So this presentation is really going to focus on how incredibly important and valuable it is to work on preventing losses so that we don't end up sort of in a tight spot, let's say. So in terms of that trajectory, we were talking about climate change and its impacts on insured losses, non-insured losses related to flooding. So I just wanted to provide a bit of a broader context about climate change impacts overall in Canada. So according to the federal government's report in 2019 called Canada's Changing Climate, Canada's climate has warmed and will warm further in the future, driven by human influence. Both the past and future warming in Canada is, on average, about double the magnitude of global warming. That's in part because we're quite a cold country, so the changes here seem more extreme than in the middle regions of the Earth, where it's more moderate. And essentially, this warming is effectively irreversible. And we can try to slow down the rate of the warming, but it's not likely that we're going back. So it really, I must impress upon people that it's so important to adjust to our new normal now and anticipate the new normal of the future and get ahead of that curve by taking action today. So some of the climate impacts that we'll see across Canada, they vary depending on the location. So you can have more extreme heat or less extreme cold. You can have shorter seasonal coverage of snow and ice. There's some melting of glaciers and permafrost, and there's some rise in sea level. And we're also going to see some intensification of certain extremes that we're already seeing, but we'll see more of. Intense rainfall and urban flooding. So urban flooding refers to things like sewer backup and sort of overland water coming in through your windows from heavy rainstorms. Coastal flooding and erosion, severe heat waves, and increased risk of drought and forest fire. So there's a little video here. I have a link within the presentation you can click on later. It's through the provincial website though, so you can easily find it, but it's a very good video about the impacts of climate change that are anticipated on the province of PEI. In summary though, it says by 2100, the following climate change impacts are expected to contribute to increased flood and erosion risk for PEI. There'll be an increased number of heavy rainfall events, increased number of hurricanes and heavy snowstorms, ocean level rise is anticipated between 50 and 75 centimeters, which will help to accelerate coastal erosion, an increased number of storm surge events, an increased number of river flood events, and increased erosion. So, so that's some challenging news to hear. And it sets the stage that change is here, it's coming, and this is now to turn to the more positive and proactive part of the conversation and presentation that talks about adapting to this new normal. So in summary, we're talking about a lot of different things that are, say, outside of the resident control to to manage the risks. There's the changing weather, there's development that changes the way that water flows on the land, you know, as we develop within our municipality, where we say cut down trees, fill in wetlands, etc. And so sort of harden the surfaces so that there's less ability for the water to be absorbed. We're also dealing with old infrastructure, so old pipes and ponds that need to be maintained, and sometimes municipalities can't keep up, so it becomes a bit of a challenge. And also at the home level, we see inadequate flood protection features and a lack of maintenance of protective devices. So when you look at all of this all together, it contributes to increased flood damages and losses at the home. And when you think about what residents can really control, it's at the house itself and within the property line. And then you sort of keep in touch with your government to see how they're doing and where you can lend support. But essentially, that's much of what they're doing is out of your control. So today we're going to talk about what residents can actually do at their homes and on their properties to limit their risk. So a few water damage fast facts I like to pull out that I think surprise quite a few people. I think when people think of flooding, they think of what they see on the news. So they're thinking of a river swelling over its banks and washing out homes, or coastal storm surge eating houses and pulling them out into the water. But in fact, in terms of the Canadian experience, that's actually a relatively small percentage of homes and percentage of happenings, but it makes for good news, right? So you see more of that in the news because it's flashy and newsworthy, but the reality is not so flashy. It's kind of boring, and it's important to know the facts though, so that you can protect yourself against what's actually most likely to impact you. So did you know that the majority, or 60% of water claims, are caused by leaking appliances and water pipes? So it's important to maintain those, the plumbing and fixtures and pipes to protect ourselves. And the remainder of claims are split between sewer backups, sump pump failure, and overland flooding, so water that comes in overland caused by heavy rainfall. So all Canadian homes are at risk of flooding from these risks because everybody has plumbing and everybody lives where it can rain. So those are really the risks that we're going to be featuring tonight, focusing on tonight, managing. And roughly only 5% of Canadian homes face additional risks due to overland flooding from rivers, lakes, and oceans due to the force of the water or the debris exerted by moving water on walls and foundations, and from property erosion. So we'll focus on the most common risks, and then I'll give you some additional resources that you can use to look at addressing risks on higher risk properties. So one thing to understand about flooding too is in the home, there's all different sources of water damage. And if you want to figure out how to address your water risks, your flood risks, you have to sort of look at the different systems in the house and look at the different ways that they can come in. When you see a challenge, then address that challenge before it becomes a problem. So like we said, the most common cause of losses are from plumbing and fixtures. Then there's also sewer backup. So when the municipal sewer gets full of water and then starts going backwards down to the sort of it flows to the lowest point. So it can back up into your toilets or your floor drains, etc. Then there's overland water. So when water from rivers, rainfall, lakes, or ocean sort of flows over land, pools around your house, it sort of filters through gravity in whatever way it can to the lowest point. So if you have cracks in your foundation, little holes in your windows, some kind of gap within your foundation, there's a higher risk that it will come in. And there's also groundwater, so water that sits around your house and then slowly seeps in through the foundation. So there's all different ways that flooding can occur, and sometimes if there's a heavy storm event, sometimes you'll get a variety of these flood impacts all at once, because they can be connected too. So in the grand scheme, the main things you want to do to keep your home dry, so these are dry flood proofing principles, so to keep the water out. So the first thing is to keep the water out of the house, so you usually start around the outside, and then wherever it might come in the inside, block that as well. Remove it as quickly as possible if it gets in, let it drain out, pump it out. And reduce the risk of damage by selecting flood-resistant storage options, furnishings, and building materials. And particularly, why you have to think about flood-resistant materials, even if it's called dry flood-proofing, is that taking action can reduce your risk but not eliminate your risk. So you always have to imagine, okay, I'm doing my best, but just in case a pipe bursts or water comes in through that little crack in the window, what is going to get wet? I have to think of how to reduce the risk that things that I own in my house are going to get damaged. So at our center, we are an applied research center. So we took the national best practices for flood risk reduction. We created an assessment tool and we trained assessors to do the assessments and to walk through a house with a resident to talk about what the features were at the house, the condition of the features, and talk about how much maintenance they did. And then we developed a training program. That's the one that Alistair and some colleagues took as well. But we sort of collected data as we were going through the houses with the permission of the residents. And we looked at 80 different features, 40 outside, 40 inside, and really when we boiled down all the data, a lot of the same risk kept coming up again and again and again. And in order to take the information that we'd learned from doing all these assessments and turn it into practical resources for residents, we thought we should just take the key things that were the most common challenge and sort them logically into an approach that you can take to reduce your risk that is most cost effective. So what we did is we focused on taking the risk out of the system by first completing simple maintenance steps, second, completing simple upgrades to the home, and 3, completing more complex upgrades. So I'll just go through those one bit at a time. Oh, and something that has really become important to speak about as we've been working in communities is that if you are a property owner, you have the authority to make decisions about any physical changes to a home. So that's great. So all of the steps that we talk about in the 3 steps document, you have the authority to make all those decisions if you are a homeowner or a landlord. However, if you're a tenant, you're responsible for managing risks related to your personal belongings. And so the actions on the 3 steps document that would apply to you all involve things that relate to protecting your belongings, but do not involve making physical changes to the structure of the building because you don't have authority to do that. So typical tenant activities would include maintenance and storage actions such as keeping your floor drains clear or storing your personal belongings up on a shelf or in waterproof boxes. So just wanted to put that into context. So the first step is to maintain what you've got at least twice a year. Every house is a little bit different. So you're going to see what are the flood protection features in your house or around your property and what can you do to take care of them. It's a matter of developing good home safety tips. Generally speaking, in spring and in fall, complete your seasonal maintenance and before you go on vacation as well, just to make sure everything is fine. And in terms of tenant considerations, the key actions that tenants can do in this line of items are to remove debris from storm drains and other maintenance actions that you and your landlord agree to. Every landlord and tenant has a different arrangement. So if you're super keen about flood risk reduction, you can talk to them about some opportunities that you can undertake to help them out with some of the flood risk reduction. So some other maintenance activities include cleaning out your eaves troughs and downspouts so that if water is collected there, it can flow away from your house and not overflow at your foundation. Do regular checks for plumbing, plumbing fixtures and appliances. Test your sump pump. Just pour a bucket of water down there in the spring and fall, see if it's working. And if you have a backwater valve, make sure to clean that out. We have some really simple videos that show you exactly how to do that, that I'll cite at the end. Step 2 is complete simple upgrades. So you complete the simple upgrades. It's in most cases, get what you've already bought out of your garage that you haven't gotten around to installing yet, or head to the hardware store to get some more basics. And most of these are installations that people can complete themselves, or they'll have a friend who, if you're not physically able to, if you'll have a friend or a family member who can help you, because they're really quite simple. In terms of tenant considerations, you can store your valuables and remove obstructions to the floor drain. And so some of these simple upgrades involve doing things like getting a window well cover, covering your window well so it's less likely to fill up with rainwater or leaks from the eaves troughs. And you have to make sure that the fire department permits that. That's particularly a concern if there are people sleeping in the basement, if there's a tenant situation. Also, to make sure your downspouts are extended and your sump pump discharge pipe also goes at least 2 meters from your foundation or to the nearest drainage swale, which is sort of the ditch in between the properties that takes water away from the home. Next, you can store valuables and your hazardous materials in watertight containers up on a shelf about 12 inches and secure your fuel tanks. If water does get in, you don't want your fuel tank tipping over, because it can cause a toxic nightmare that incredibly increases the cleanup costs. And just like that with paints and say pesticides, you want them up and dry, because if they tip and they spill on the water, that's going to really contaminate your basement as well. Also remove anything that's covering your floor drain and install and maintain flood alarms. Fortunately, many flood alarms are $10. You can put them beside an appliance here, like a dishwasher or a washing machine. Water tanks are really important ones too, and you can also put them right under your sink to tell you if there's a leak going on. Step 3 is to complete more complex upgrades. So you're going to work with the contractor, and you're going to obtain permissions where necessary from your municipality. So these are generally, because they're changes to the physical property, these are not things that tenants would be authorized to make changes on their own, but they can certainly ask their landlord about if they wish to. So the window wells, a lot of window wells just sit flush with the ground, but best practice is for window wells to sit 10 to 15 centimeters above the ground to prevent any water from flowing in over land, and also make sure the water is draining away from grading the soil around the window well properly. You can disconnect your downspout if it's attached into your foundation drain and constantly sending water to your sump pump. But it's good to check with the municipality about that. So you disconnect it, cap your foundation drain, and extend your downspout. You can correct your grading to make sure the water's directed away from your house, so it's flowing downhill. Some really simple grading changes, say if you've got a little garden bed around the house, it's just sort of sloping toward the house. you can get out a rake and sort of move it so it's moving the water away from the house. That's low tech, low cost. You can do that yourself, but if it gets to be something more expensive, more complicated, like if your driveway has sagged or your walkway has sagged, you're probably going to want to work with a contractor to make sure that that's done properly. You could also install a backwater valve to make sure that if there is a backflow of sewage from the sewer system, it will not enter your house. And you can install a backup sump pump and backup battery. That's particularly important if the power does go out, say during a thunderstorm. The sump pump will still be working for you and will be removing water from around your foundation drain. So those are the main 3 steps you can take to reduce the most common risks of what we call urban flooding. So overland flooding and sewer backup flooding. Now, one of the interesting things about the last line of actions, things do cost more money, but there are some municipal subsidies sometimes, but also there is a growing number of insurance providers. You have to shop around. They all offer different products and different discounts. But you can get a discount of up to 15% on your home insurance by doing things like having a backup sump pump or a backwater valve, you know, correcting your grading, changing your water heater to a low water volume heater, so a tankless hot water heater. The other thing that the insurance companies that I've chatted with, something they're really giving more attention to lately, particularly in condo buildings as well, is having an automatic water shutoff, so that if the water pressure drops quickly, like if there's a leak or something like that, the water will shut off automatically, and that prevents the most common type of flooding, which is failures from pipes and appliances. So that's something to keep an eye on as well, and to chat with your insurer about. These 3 steps, what we've done is we've assembled them in a simple, it's almost like a step-by-step questionnaire that you go through on your phone or on your computer. It's called the Home Flood Protection Checkup. Usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes to complete. And then what's nice is it will create a confidential custom report for you that you can download onto your device, and it sort of have a step-by-step plan that you can follow to reduce risk at your home. So we talked about the most common types of flooding in Canada, the urban flood risks. So these are great to start with for all homes, but I just wanted to note that there are some higher risk homes in Canada. We did talk about 5% of homes are at higher risk because they're close to rivers and oceans. So there are a variety of approaches that people can take to address these risks, and it can be a very big decision. You want to talk about, think about the different types of flooding that are impacting your house, the severity of the risk, and maybe, for example, the risk isn't that high right now, but what about in 5 years, 10 years? Is it predicted to get quite a bit worse with climate change? And you need to think about all these things when you're thinking about investing your money in changes. So one of the first approaches is just to defend your property. So you're going to put up like property barriers, temporary barriers, and with the same view in mind that you'll try to keep your house dry. The next concept is to adapt, to actually say, okay, so we're going to keep our house in position, but we know that the water will come and go sometimes, depending on floods that are coming. So people that make these types of changes, they actually, they make accommodations for water to enter the building and then to leave again quickly, and then to dry out as quickly as possible. So that's called wet flood proofing. So you can adjust, in some cases, adapt the existing structure to do that. And in other cases, you can elevate the building to accommodate that type of water process. And then the most expensive option, and it's for the most severe risk locations, it's to raise the building to a higher profile on that property, or to remove it altogether. So you can tell these are complex, expensive decisions. You would work with your insurer, with your municipality, and look at short and long-term risk before you're making decisions about how you're going to proceed. So one of the sort of in-between measures is these barriers that I was talking about. You can get all kinds of different temporary barriers. Some of them are disposable, most of them are reusable. So it can be a bit of an investment, but then you know you've always got them at the ready. You can reuse them again and again. And you work with a professional to determine which are the best types of barriers for you, and to look at your variety of options. So some barriers are to block water at openings, like these roll down types will block the openings of your windows and your doors from, this is a riverine flood situation. And then there are other ones that will block water from coming onto the perimeter. So there's sort of, you can have like a tube form or whatever that go all the way around your building, your property line, and that's to keep your the water from coming onto your property. So very different approaches, different products, different uses. And we do have a third-party organization that serves Canada and the US, and they have a list of flood prevention barriers, and they have people that can talk to you about different products that might be appropriate for your site and help you compare and contrast to make a decision about what ones might work for you. So in Prince Edward Island, in terms of the higher risk homes, there are some specific helps or assistance that are unique to Canada. So the PEI Department of Environment, Energy and Climate Action has produced a coastal property guide that helps people understand what you should know about living on the coast. Talks a little bit about climate projections. It talks a little bit about managing flooding and erosion on the site. Where to think about building your house, how to renovate to keep it safe. So it's a really great starter guide. And then there's this amazing service that's not available anywhere else in Canada that I know of. If you're thinking of buying a coastal property, or you live on a coastal property and you're thinking, oh, I want to know how to protect it, I'm thinking of renovating, I want some guidance, the province of PEI will actually come to your site. They will do an evaluation of your site. They will look at maps. They will talk to you. They will send you a custom report. So that's pretty interesting, because if you're considering a coastal property to purchase, you can do this assessment before you make the decision to purchase. I think it's about a 5-day turnaround to get the report to you. So that is very interesting. I think you should consider that. Something else I want people to take into consideration as well is if you do live near a water course, so a river, a wetland, if you're thinking of making some changes to your property, or installing things like bank stabilization, like rocks or something like that to stabilize your bank, then you can get in touch with the province, and they will give you water course and wetland. They'll share with you the regulations and a request for a permit to make changes to your property, because they're not just looking at how one property is functioning, they look at how all the properties function together, and they want to make sure that any change on one property doesn't negatively impact the rest. So they are a great resource and can give you a lot of information too. So the links are live here, but I've also produced like a link sheet, and that will be circulated to you after the presentation. So just to start to wrap up here, when we think about prevention, it's really important to think, well, why is it so important that I anticipate challenges and get ahead of them and pay for them myself. And one of the biggest things is because that's really how the system is designed to work. You are residents, primarily homeowners and landlords. You're responsible for managing your private property, the risks on your property, and working with an insurance company to get coverages, policy coverages that are going to benefit you. When there's a small event that happens, it is the resident first who pays. If they feel that it's worth going to their insurance company, then they get their insurance company to help them. And like I said, there are limits to what is covered and how much is covered. Now, these are for small events. When there's a larger event, it's always the private insurance and private funds, private landowner that pays first. But sometimes there's like a very large event, like a CAT event, catastrophic event, and that will trigger some provincial and territorial disaster financial assistance. Unfortunately, those payments tend to be very, very small and delayed. And if that is the event is so big that it's beyond what the province can handle, then they call in the federal government to provide assistance. However, these things are, the assistance is limited and is delayed. So even if you are anticipating that, you're in a higher risk area, it's still important to really focus on what you can do to prevent damage, because government supports really are very limited. Just a little bit more about flood insurance, or insurance in general. Actually, a lot of people just think, well, I'm going to buy an insurance policy, and then if anything happens, I'm covered. Well, something that is very important to know is that insurance is designed to help people recover from sudden and accidental escapes of water, plumbing pipes, appliance, and fixtures. If it can be shown that you have not done your preventative maintenance, that it was not necessarily sudden and accidental, you should have known about it because, say, there was a drip there or there's a crack there in your wall, you may be denied claim, or you may be denied by your insurance company. Something else is that insurance is designed for people who live in a house, or at least have someone monitoring it constantly. So if you're going to be away for, say, 3 days, it all depends on the insurance policy, but 3 days or more, if you're not there, a flood happens, you come home, you may have your insurance policy denied because you were not home making sure that your house was fine. So that's something important to consider. If you're going to be away, make sure that you have either an alarm company monitoring your house, or that you have a friend or a neighbor doing that. The other thing that people don't know is that water damage in a home, it's typically always covers accidental escapes of plumbing, appliances, and fixtures, but optional coverages need to be purchased. They don't necessarily come with your policy, and you can't always get them, so you have to talk to your insurer about sewer backup flooding coverage, overland flooding coverage, and groundwater flooding coverage. The other thing is that people need to understand basically what they're responsible for, and then what they're responsible for is what they need to get insurance for. So owners are typically responsible for reducing risk to the building, to the property, and to the personal belongings, so they need insurance for that. Landlords are typically responsible for reducing risk to their building and the property, and any belongings that they have on site. So maybe they have something stored. It's their responsibility to get coverage for that. And I rented to a tenant a couple of times, and one of the things that landlords can do to make sure their tenants are protected and that they feel comfortable having tenants in the building who say are less vulnerable is that they can require tenants to show proof of insurance. Tenant insurance can cost usually like $25 to $30 a month, that kind of thing. And tenants themselves are typically responsible for reducing their risk to their personal belongings. So they need coverage for replacing their personal belongings if there is a problem. I think I'm going to go over this a little bit more quickly because we're almost running out of time. But another research organization at the university called Partners for Action, they did a survey of Canadians, and there's limited knowledge that people are in a high-risk zone. 37% of people didn't know if they were covered for overland flooding. They thought they were, but they weren't. 50% of homeowners were confused about what's covered and not covered by their sewer backup flood insurance. And the big kicker is that only 30% of Canadians have taken action to protect their homes from flooding. And that's one of the big goals of this seminar, is to help people understand how important it is to start taking those actions to protect yourself. Now, this was something that really blew my mind when I first read it. Canadian renters on average are generally unaware that they even need tenant insurance. They only 47% of Canadians have tenant insurance. So they often will sign a lease and they think if anything goes wrong, then the myth number one, the landlord will cover all damage. If there is a flood, a fire, anything like that. But the fact is the landlord has insurance on the building and the items that the landlord owns, but the tenants are responsible for their own property within the rental unit. Landlords don't actually have coverage for tenants' belongings. And myth number two is that the landlord is required to pay for alternative accommodation while a damaged unit is being prepared. So it should have said repaired, sorry about that. The fact is that tenants are responsible for paying their own alternative accommodations. So that's important because if your apartment's not available, you have to have somewhere to live, and it's very, very costly to, say, rent a hotel or whatever. So tenant insurance helps to pay for that. And the other myth is that tenant insurance is costly. Now, everyone's income is a little bit different. So for some people, an extra $23 a month is going to be very difficult. I understand that. However, the challenge is if there is a flood, a fire, anything like that, you won't have any way to pay for alternative accommodation or to repair your belongings. So it's just something that I would suggest that people consider. So all in all, I just want to impress upon people that yes, there are some challenges associated with flooding. Climate change is increasing the likelihood of, say, extreme weather events that will make flooding more common. However, we know there are a lot of very practical things we can do, and there are a lot of great resources at the Intact Center and through the province that can help you take practical action. So if you go to our webpage, homefloodprotect.ca, there are fact sheets, how-to videos, self-assessment tools, tips about how to reduce your risk of mold growth, temporary flood protection barriers. Something I like to talk about too is the importance of sharing what you've learned with others, because we know that one of the key influences for people are friends and family that they trust. So if you've learned how to protect your home, please share it with your friends and family so that they can help themselves. And we've even got a social media toolkit if you like sharing exciting messages. Maybe you'd think they were exciting through Twitter and Facebook. We have a whole social media toolkit that you can use to maybe personally help some friends and family, but also if you're part of a church group or a community group, you can consider sharing those with them as well. So if you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. We'll chat a bit now and answer some questions, but please reach out to me at c8evans@waterloo.ca. one of the things to note with our research center is that we're always trying to fine tune and do better. And we're always listening to what the gaps in resources are. So if there's a resource that you'd really like us to build, I can't say we can build everything, but most of the time we can really help you out to help you find existing resources, or we can craft something new for you. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
All right. Well, first off, thanks so much for presenting. We haven't had any questions yet, but if anyone does have questions, please share in the chat now, and we can go through all your questions if you have any. And as I mentioned at the start, not everyone might have heard, but we will be sharing the link to this presentation once we have it uploaded, as well as a sheet of links to different resources that Cheryl has made for us. So those are both going to be very helpful. And like Cheryl said, you can definitely share those on your social media through your different groups. And this is, it's very interesting information. And since my time doing the course, there's a lot I've learned, and even listening today, there's a few things that I was still learning and picking up on, and definitely is a great talk and a very important topic. And I think it's particularly a good start because it kind of touches on some things like climate change and insurance and protecting your home through different methods. And the next 4 talks throughout this speaker series will go more into depth on some of those topics. So I know not everyone has the time, but it'll definitely be very beneficial for you guys all to attend those. And even if you're not able to attend on the day of, they will all be made available for public viewing on the city's YouTube page, and eventually we'll get those up on the website. So again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just send them our way. And if not, sounds like you're very open to emails and any public inquiries, which is very great and something that I really like about your organization. Just built on public engagement, which is very important in my opinion.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, it doesn't look like anyone is. I'm not sure if Zoom, you can see if someone's typing or not, but maybe we'll give it another minute, and then if not, we can wrap up and call it a night.
I just wanted to mention something that, so that was interesting. What does that say?
This is not a question, but a comment to add to the myths about renters insurance. In many places, they will not give insurance to renters if more than 2 unrelated people live together. Interesting. I'm not sure. I'm not too familiar with the insurance world. Are you able to comment on
say, Alistair?
Oh, sorry. It's another myth about renters insurance. In many places, they will not give insurance to renters if more than 2 unrelated people live together. I guess that is a myth. I assume that's definitely not true, or I'd hope so.
Yeah, I think really as an individual, you are insuring, this is to the best of my knowledge, I'm not an insurance provider, but from experience having to live with other people in shared housing, I had to get my own insurance, tenant insurance. My housemate Susie had to get her own insurance because it's sort of a deal between you and the insurance company. You say, I have this much stuff. This is how big my apartment is. This is where it's located. So they develop a policy just for you. and then they would develop a policy for Susie, etc. So I believe that's the way that would work. Yeah.
Yes, I could definitely see how some people may get confused by that and think that only one person maybe has to and they can cover someone else's. Here's another question here. Do you have resources or information on the other things associated with extreme weather events associated with flooding, such as tree loss and shore erosion?
So there are a variety of resources available through the province and other organizations. A really good organization that is American but provides a lot of really great resources is FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association. So they have a lot of guides about sort of shoreline stabilization, how to retrofit your house in extreme locations, you know, that are prone to hurricanes, etc. I could certainly find you some additional links if you provide a sort of a question, say to Alistair or to myself. I can get you the links to those resources for sure. And when I was doing some research about the province of PEI, I was quite interested to know what some of the not-for-profit organizations are doing as well, to do tree planting, shoreline restoration, habitat restoration, riverbank restoration. So they have a lot of great resources too within the not-for-profit world. So lots of good stuff to share.
And I would assume a lot of the damages from extreme weather events like hurricanes and knocking down trees would be typically covered under a standard home insurance.
Oh, that I'm not sure.
Okay.
That you'd have to check with your insurance provider. It's a really good question. I'm not honestly sure.
Yeah, and I will mention our fifth talk, our last talk is with Graham Little, who is working with the Insurance Bureau of Canada. So for any insurance related questions, I'm sure he could definitely go into deeper depth of that kind of information.
Yeah, and oh, thank you. Yeah, I know that when I've spoken to some renters, they're really excited about reducing the risk of flooding, and sometimes they feel really awkward about speaking to their landlord. So I think there's an opportunity certainly for, say, the town to do some landlord organization trainings, but also, you know, if you do feel comfortable sharing something like the 3 steps document, it is something for landlords to consider. A lot of them don't even know. And my boss, when he was a student many years ago, he was telling us a story that he lived in a basement apartment. He loved the location, but the landlord was really busy, just didn't understand about flood risk reduction. The soil was all sort of drooping around the foundation, and the downspouts just dumped right into these pits at the side of the house. And every time it rained, there'd be water flowing under his bed. And he said to the landlord, can you please do something? And the landlord's like, yeah, we'll get to it. So he actually convinced the landlord to go to the store and buy the downspout extensions, and then put the downspout extensions on. And then when it rained, it stopped flowing, water stopped flowing under his bed, but it was because he actively asked his landlord to do that. And it was so important because all of his stuff was getting wet all the time. So
yeah, there's definitely
delicate dance.
There's definitely a range of landlords, and like you mentioned, currently where I live, they do require a tenant insurance, but that's definitely not the norm if you're just renting from someone who owns an extra home or something.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like trees themselves, yeah, I guess they usually aren't covered under insurance as an asset. No, definitely something in my work with natural assets now being more considered as assets. That's something I definitely find interesting. But yes, so if you have, say, car insurance or home insurance, it should hopefully cover your, say, windows or any damage it does to your property that are traditionally considered assets and are insured.
Yeah, and I think one of the points of this presentation is that most people, they know they have a policy, they know they're covered for something, but they usually don't really understand what it is they're covered for until after they're making a claim. And then, oh, maybe they're covered for some things, maybe they're not covered for any things. So there's a lot of, you know, unfortunate surprises. So it's just great to get ahead of the curve. And I mean, I just on my cell phone the other day, I got a notice that my home insurance was coming up for renewal, and it suggested that I review my policy, and if I had any questions, talk to my insurance provider. And so that's sort of a good reminder as well, because every year the policies change a little bit and your needs change a little bit. So it's sort of like an annual trigger, an annual checkup, a good time to check in and make sure you do understand and make sure you have adequate coverage. So yeah, it's better to sort of get ahead of it for sure.
Yeah, and I think definitely one thing that was really covered in the home flood risk assessment training course that I've taken and you helped develop was just the difference between people's understanding and willing to do the kind of work if they have experienced flooding in the past, and whether they, or if they haven't, or even if they've known someone who's went through a basement flooding. It definitely changes. And from talking to residents, it seems like people who have had flood damage are, it's true. It's going through something like that will definitely realize how serious it is.
Yeah, yeah, it's not fun.
Okay, so we have another question here. Are there any specific actions you would recommend to protect against flooding either before or as part of insulating a basement? We are preparing for this upgrade and wonder if there's flood considerations to take here.
Ooh, that's a good one. So this seems to be a really interesting and rapidly growing field. So first of all, one thing I'd say is to talk to your insurance providers, because if you are, say, going from an unfinished space to a finished space, you need to speak to your insurance provider about getting additional coverages to make sure that if there is damage there, that will be considered, because presently the value of the assets down there is very low, but it will be going up. So you need to have that recalibrated. But also, a growing number of insurance providers are giving discounts for things like, if instead of having hardwood flooring or wall-to-wall carpet, if you have tile instead, then you can get a preferred rate. What else? If there's like automatic water shut-off valves, if there is a flood, they will often give discounts if while you're doing your renovations, you put in a backwater valve, you put a backup sump pump in. And also, I think as well, those are just sort of like the finishes. But before you start renovating, you really want to look at how flood resilient your basement is now, and if there are any moisture issues, to deal with those before you finish your basement. So, and it's not just like looking at the foundation for cracks. It's looking at how all these different things work together. So is the grading appropriate to drive water away from your house? Are your windows adequate so that if there is water, say that fills up in the window wells, that the windows are going to prevent water from coming in? So you want to look at how likely it is that water is going to come in the first place. So it's worth working with your contractor to look at sort of the flood readiness of your home now. Make sure that any water issues are addressed first before you even think of renovating. And it's interesting too, when I go in the hardware store, I got very excited when I start to see things like water resistant flooring, water resistant drywall, water resistant beams. And so there are more and more materials that are available. And we do have a list that I've shared with Alistair that'll be circulated. It is a list of water resistant building materials, so that will be helpful to you. But now there are a growing number of contractors that are like dry basement renovation specialists. So they'll be thinking about how do we make sure that it's sealed from the outside. When we finish, how are we making sure that we've got flood resilient building materials, etc. So there are a growing number of specialists that will give you sort of quotes on how to, say, build sort of not a great flood resilient basement, but then how to put in these simple upgrades so that it is more flood resilient. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do in the planning stages first.
All right, I think we'll start. Oh, yeah, there we go. Just another thank you. All right, I think we'll wrap it up there. I want to thank everyone again for coming and participating in this virtual speaker series, and I hope we can see some of you in the coming weeks as we continue on with our next presenter. Next week we have a presentation about how to make a rain garden at home here in Charlottetown by Norman Dewar, who works with the Ellens Creek Watershed Group. He installed a rain garden rather at Spring Park Elementary a few years ago, and he learned a lot of lessons from that, and he's a very, very valuable source of information. And just from talking to him, I've learned a lot, and I think that's going to be a great presentation from him. But as I've said a couple times, I will send out a recording to this along with the resource sheet that Cheryl has provided. And we also have a short survey just to go over how you learned about this webinar, what you thought about it, and what other programs you'd like to see from the city's environment and sustainability team in the future, if there's anything specifically you're interested in. So that'll all be included in a follow-up email within probably tomorrow or on Monday. Hopefully at the latest, we can get that out to you. But once again, thank you so much, Cheryl. Great talk, and thanks everyone for attending, and I hope you all have a good evening.
You're welcome. Thanks so much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.